Welcome to the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with Real-Time Fantasy Sports. I'm joined again by Logan Glaser. Logan, thanks for coming on. As always, fun to talk
Yeah,
with
of
you.
course, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
So this week, Logan, we like to preview all the games, and then we pick a category. This week, we're going to do players we're fading in Week 6. So we're in Week 6 already of the fantasy football season. Two teams are on a bye, the Packers and Steelers. And as always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. Logan and I will get to them, answer them. If you have any sit-start questions, trade questions, you name it, we're happy to discuss them and give you an answer that we hope can help you win your Week 6 games.
Yeah,
So
and
Logan,
before we came on, we talked about kind of with fades. These
yeah,
are guys that you kind of don't want to put in your lineup. I'm also going to talk about some stars that I think will have a more down week. I think you should still start them, and I'll mention that. But I just don't think that they're going to have as good of a week as they have had in the past.
I'm the same way. I have a couple big name players that made my list, so it's hard to sit them, but if you have better options, I might go with them or just temper your expectations a little bit. That might be a good way to put it as well. And then last week, Logan, I got to talk about this before we talk about all the games. I mean, the injuries. That was just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. As I was writing my injury story last night and early this morning, I mean, there was some huge players that landed on that injured reserve list this week. I mean, there's some huge holes to fill going forward for a lot of teams.
Oh, absolutely. And with Justin Jefferson, number one pick in most leagues, that is just a massive hole. I don't know if KJ Osborne is going to be able to step up and be a starter in fantasy leagues. His value definitely goes up. Same with Addison and Hawkinson. But the number one overall pick curse continues, is
Yeah.
what a lot of people said. We've had lots of injuries over the past couple of years with that number one pick. We had CMC. He was the number one overall pick for several years and kept getting hurt. And then Jonathan Taylor had it when he was the number one overall pick. And now we got Jefferson.
Maybe it's the new Madden curse. The Madden curse has gone away. I don't think that. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. The last few years, the Madden cover has not gotten hurt. So
Yeah, the new
I think,
curse is now the number one overall pick in fantasy football leagues.
yeah, that's scary. I don't want that to be a trend going forward, but who knows? We'll see. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll go ahead and get started, Logan, talk about all the games. Tonight's game, not too exciting. Broncos 1-4 at the Chiefs 4-1. Who are you fading in this game?
Yeah, in this game, I'm going to be fading Cortland Sutton. So he started the season off red hot. He was dominant the first couple of weeks, but the last 2 weeks, he has only combined for 40 yards in the last two matchups. There's been a lot of trade rumors going on around with him and Jerry Jeudy, and I think just as Broncos as a whole, their motivation is lost. I think they're already wrapping this up as a lost season, and I think the Chiefs just roll over them tonight with that. So I'm going to
Yeah,
be fading.
shocking. Neither of us are going to pick a Chief to fade, so I'm not going to do that either. That's a prime matchup for them against a suddenly bad Broncos defense. But my fade's Javonte Williams. It looks like he's back this week. He's not even on the injury report, so he's going to play. But I'm still staying away from him. I think this is a game script game. Broncos are going to get down big, have to throw the ball more. That means less playing time for Williams, more playing time for Samaje Perine. He played well last week, got some catches. Plus, Williams, he's failed to hit double-digit fantasy points in any game this year. So he's coming back from injury. I think they're going to be down by a lot. I just don't think he has a great game in this matchup. So I'm staying away from Javonte Williams.
Yeah, we do have a question about Javonte Williams that pertains.
Oh, already. Wow.
So
Javonte
Javonte
Williams.
or McLaughlin, a better for redraft start this week?
Oh, that's a good one. What do you think? You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think until Javonte has a fully game back, I'm going to go with McLaughlin. I think he's just looked really good in that offense. I think they're going to be playing from behind, and he's got high potential with the receptions with that.
I mean, for me, I might stay away from both if you have a better option. But I guess
Sure.
if I had to pick one, I would say Williams just because I think he's going to play more. Even though I just said I don't think he's going to have a very good game, I think he'll be on the field more. So I would lean him, but it's a close call. It's kind of a toss up. We have another question. Thoughts on David Njoku? Where does he rank for you? What are you thinking about Njoku? I guess maybe going forward is what the question is
Yeah,
here.
a lot depends on Watson as well. I heard that he's not practicing right now, so a lot of question marks still with him in the entire passing game. So a lot's going to depend on his availability with that offense.
Yeah, Njoku's net the top 50 yards in a game this season. He did have 7 targets his last game, so that's encouraging. I think that passing game gets going a little bit. I still think he has value. It's not a guy I'm dropping by any means. I think he could be a good spot play at tight end going forward. He had some big games last year. Remember down the stretch, finally looked like that elite tight end. So I think maybe Njoku can get it going here in the short term. Obviously, those burns are a concern, though. I don't know if you saw the Twitter.
I
Uh,
saw that is
that was terrible. Holy cow.
oh, that was a lot worse than I thought it would be with
I
his.
can't believe he played in that game. He played in the game right
Yeah,
after that happened.
that is remarkable.
It is. Holy cow. So I'm not giving up on Njoku. For this week, I don't like him much against San Francisco, but I still think he can get it going. He has at least 4 catches, 3 games, 3 straight games as well. Tight end's not a very good position at this point, also. So great. I'm glad we're getting questions. I always like trying to help people out and talk about that stuff as well. So keep them coming if you have them. Next game, though, Logan, let's get to the next one. Ravens 3-2 at the Titans 2-3. This is another London game. Is there a player you're fading in this matchup?
Yeah, a player I'm gonna be fading is gonna be Zay Flowers. I think depending on your options on your bench, he really struggled last week against Pittsburgh. He had several drops that were thrown right to him. He also had probably a wide open 60, 70-yard touchdown that he just fell down on, and he couldn't recover that as well. He saw 11 targets, which was encouraging, but he only had 5 receptions. He's yet to receive or have a touchdown on the year. We'll see if that happens in London, but usually those London games are pretty low scoring, and this is also going up against a good Tennessee defense.
Yeah, I agree. Could struggle again in this one. My fade is a big name, Derrick Henry. So we talked about this at the top. I know it's hard to sit someone like that, and he's going to get volume still. So, I mean, if you have to play him, go ahead and play him because I totally understand you used high draft capital on him. But I expect another poor game from him. He has fewer than 50 rushing yards 2 of his last 3 games, fewer than double-digit fantasy points 2 of those games as well. He just doesn't look like the same back, in my opinion. That entire offense doesn't look very good with Ryan Tannehill having some struggles as well. And they just have DeAndre Hopkins at receiver. Treylon Burks has been hurt. Chig Okonkwo hasn't done a whole lot. So that whole offense kind of scares me right now. I almost like Tyjae Spears more better this week because he can catch the ball, make some plays out of the backfield. The Ravens, too, 11th fewest fantasy points to running backs allowed. Again, tough to sit Henry. I totally understand if you want to play him. You have a lot drafted in him, so it's hard to sit your stars, but I would temper my expectations for him again this week. All right, Logan, we have some more questions over here. Someone asked, should I add Tank Dell and drop Gus Edwards? What do you think?
I think it's about an even move. It really depends if you need a wide receiver more than a running back in that situation. I think Justice Hill has been getting a lot of work in that Baltimore backfield. He's kind of almost emerging as the number one back. So it really just depends where you need that depth at. If you need it at running back or you need wide receiver, because I think valuation wise they're about equal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you need a receiver, I would pull the trigger though. I mean, Edwards, he has double digit carries 4 straight games. He still hasn't done a whole lot. He only has double digit fantasy points in one of those 4 games. He doesn't catch the ball. He has 2 catches for the entire season. So while he is the number one back and he gets a lot of carries, he still hasn't produced a lot, especially when he doesn't find the end zone. So I think if you need a receiver, I'd pull the trigger and I'd go ahead and pick up Tank Dell and drop Edwards. I'm fine with that. All right, next game on the slate. So it is the Washington Commanders 2-3 at the Falcons 3-2. A little bit of a surprise. Falcons 3-2 squeaked out that game last week, came back there at the end and won. Who are you fading in this matchup?
Yeah, player I'm going to be fading is going to be Tyler Algier. What he's got good volume. So last week he had 17 carries. He actually had more carries last week than Robinson. But what he's struggling with is the yards per carry. Over the last 4 games, he has 3, 1.7, 2.3, and 2.4 for yards per carry, and that is just not good. I think eventually you're going to have to start going to Robinson more than Algier and have that experiment kind of be over. But he just has not been getting it done. He's been getting the volume, but he has just not been producing with that.
Agree. He has not been David Montgomery.
Yes, for sure.
Kind of a kind of a comparison with, the situation,
Absolutely.
yeah. I don't like the running back in the other on the other team, Brian Robinson, this week. So, he had a prime matchup this week. Last week, I was really high on him against a bad Bears rush defense, but he ran 6 times for just 10 yards. He has fewer than 50 rushing yards 2 straight games. He also has less than double-digit fantasy points 2 of his last 3 games. I think he might struggle again this week against a good Falcons rush defense. They allow the fewest fantasy points of running backs this season and have allowed just 1 rushing touchdown all year. So I think Robinson's a guy I would fade in this matchup. I like their passing game better for sure. We're getting more questions over here. Will Russ Wilson stay as a high-end quarterback through the bye in week 9? What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot's just going to depend on the matchups that they have coming up, along with the wide receiver core. Again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of rumors going around with Judy and Sutton potentially on the move. With that, I do think one of them will get traded. If it's before week 9, that's still to be determined, but I think a lot depends on that. I think they're losing motivation pretty quickly with that team.
Yeah, they have Kansas City 2 of the next 3 games. They play Green Bay as well, so not great
Not
matchups
the
for him.
best.
I guess Kansas City, you could see him throwing the ball a lot because he'll be down, so I could see him posting 20+ fantasy points each of those 2 games, but the Green Bay one scares me a little bit. They have a pretty good defense, although they've been a little leaky lately, so, I mean, I'm not huge on Russ going forward. I think he could have a couple big games, the rest of the year, but he still hasn't been huge. He has 1 game with 30+ fantasy points, but he has 2 games with less than 20 fantasy points. So those numbers aren't exactly off the charts. So I think he's still more of a spot play at this point. I don't trust him as a plug and play option at this point of the season. All right, next game, Logan. Minnesota Vikings 1-4 at the Chicago Bears 1-4. We will be making the trek to Chicago in my household to watch this game against 2 1-4 teams. So I'm not too excited about that, especially with Jefferson out of the picture as well. But it'll be good to see an NFL game. But who are you fading in this one?
For sure, yeah. So this player has been red hot, but I'm going to fade him because I'm going to temper my expectations on him this week, and that is Cole Kmet. So Robert Tonyan is healthy again, and Cole Kmet has pretty much been touchdown dependent over his the season so far. If he hasn't had any touchdowns, he's a fringe starter. Last week, Kmet had targets. He had 5 receptions, 40 yards, but he had that touchdown that kind of salvated that good fantasy week for him. So I think with Tunyon back in the mix, I think he won't be seeing as many targets. I think he's still a good option depending on because as we mentioned, tight end is pretty scarce. So if you don't have any better options, go ahead and start Kmet, but I would temper my expectations on him.
So I actually don't like any Bears running back this week. The whole situation just scares me. I think Rashawn Johnson, he could get cleared from his concussion, but who knows? Dante Foreman as well could be in the mix. He's been inactive much of the season. I just don't like it at all. I just don't know how they're going to use these guys. I think Johnson might be okay if he ends up being the guy that starts and gets cleared, but who knows if that's going to happen. And either way, Vikings not good against the pass. They allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points of running backs though this year. So they've been pretty good against the run, not good against the pass. I don't know who's going to get all the touches. So I'm just kind of steering clear of that running back situation in Chicago. All right, next game, Seahawks 3-1 at the suddenly resurgent Bengals, who are 2-3, starting to look a lot better. Who are you sitting in this one?
Yeah, I'm going to be sitting Tyler Lockett. So I think there's just too much wide receiver competition in Seattle with Metcalf, JSN, and then also they've had a pretty good running game so far with Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. But Lockett has not topped over 60 yards this season, and that was very surprising when looking at his stats so far. He's had one really good fantasy week, and that was in week 2 where he had 2 touchdowns, but he did not top over 60 yards with that. So I think you could definitely go elsewhere besides going with Lockett in that. I get that you probably took him in a top 6 rounds of your fantasy league, but there's just so much competition that Seahawks wide receiver room that I don't think he gets that much production.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to Smith and the Jigba going out of this bye week too. I wonder if they're going to start getting him more involved.
Yeah,
So should be
absolutely.
interesting. I actually think there's a lot of good options in this game because I think it's going to be high scoring. I don't think the Seahawks defense is very good. The Bengals defense is coming along, but still, I think the Seahawks can produce here. So I'm just going to take a shot at you here, Logan. I'm going to put Irv Smith on my fade list.
Oh,
I know not many people are
good old
starting
Irv.
him,
He has
but
not been very good this year either in a new
I
team.
know he hasn't been good. If you're not aware, Logan is a
I
big
was
Irv
so
Smith
high on
fan.
him
He
last year,
was.
and then it was bad.
So I'm fading him in this matchup. I actually thought he was going to be better this year as well, but he has just 5 receptions for the season. Seahawks allow 12 fewest fantasy points at tight ends. So I'm going with other options in the passing game in Cincinnati, and I'm fading Logan's Irv Smith. All right, Logan, next game. 49ers 5-0 at the Browns 2-2. I'm guessing you're probably not fading a lot of 49ers.
No,
What's your thought
that
here?
offense seems to be on fire. Every single person. Again, how we mentioned how there's so much competition, every single person's contributing in that offense. But
Yep.
I'm going to be fading Jerome Ford. So besides Ford's one long touchdown where he had a 70-yard touchdown, he really has not done much for that offense. Yards per carry, he goes 2.4. 6.6, which was due to that 70-yard touchdown, 1.8 and 2.9. So if you take out that 70-yard touchdown, he's below 3 on that yards per carry, and that is where Nick Chubb almost, I believe, he was leading the league this year, and then last year he led the league in yards per carry. So it's almost not a really a offensive line issue, but almost a talent issue with Ford. You also get Kareem Hunt back in the mix, and I think that just takes away from him. So I'm a little skeptical of even starting Ford in my lineups this week, especially against the 49ers, where I'm assuming that they will be playing down from.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested to see how Hunt's used coming out of the bye week. I wonder if he's going to be more integrated into the offense. So that's one thing I'm going to watch in this game. But I think the 49ers roll. I know they're coming off a big win going on the road, so maybe a little bit of a letdown, but I don't see that happening. And I'm kind of worried about the entire Browns passing game. Deshaun Watson, he didn't start the week practicing again with his shoulder injury, but it sounds like he's going to try to play. But if he plays, I don't want any part of him in my lineup, and I really don't like any of those pass options as well against this 49ers defense. So I'm definitely fading Watson, and even like Amari Cooper kind of worries me, but I don't like Watson at all. San Francisco allows the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, 12th overall against the pass. I think I'm just kind of steering clear of the entire Browns passing game in this tough matchup at home. All right, another question. Start this week. Zay Flowers, Christian Kirk, or Devontae Smith. Start 2 this week. So who are you sitting out of that group?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be sitting Flowers out of that group. I think it's just going to be a low-scoring game with being in London, going up against good Tennessee defense. And Kirk and Smith have been okay this year. Smith definitely had a bad week last year, but I think he rebounds. I believe he only had 6 yards in that last week, but I think it's definitely a big rebound week for him. And Kirk's looked as the number one option so far in Jacksonville. Him and Ridley have put up great numbers so far.
I'm the same way. I think I sit Flowers in this matchup. He got the volume last week, but didn't do much with it. Had a couple bad drops. And Devontae Smith, he's been disappointing, quite frankly. But we've seen in the past with Philadelphia when somebody has a bad week, like Goddard did 2 weeks ago, he did nothing, and then they made a point to get him the ball last week, and he had a monster game last week. So I'm thinking this is a Devontae Smith breakout game this week. He gets a lot of targets. They make him an integral part of that offense. So I say Devontae Smith, Christian Kirk in this one. That's who I'm playing out of those guys. All right, next game, Saints 3-2 at the Texans 2-3. Logan. I don't think this is going to be a really high-scoring game, so there's probably a couple guys you could think about fading in this one. Who are you fading?
Yeah, I'm going to be fading a top elite talent, and that is Chris Olave. So I think he's personally playing through an injury right now, and he stated that he does have a toe injury, but he's just pushing through it, and that's not great for fantasy owners. So in the last 2 games, he's combined for only 16 yards. He got bailed out with a touchdown last week, but you could obviously see that he was limping with that toe injury, and there's a lot of concern with that, and I don't want any part of him in my lineup even. If you have someone even like Flowers, I would much rather start Flowers over Olave and have him on the bench this week just because that injury concerns me until he gets a good fantasy week in there. I'm not going to be starting him.
So it pains me to say this, but because I have a lot of stock in him, and he has not played well this year, but I'm fading Dameon Pierce this week. He's really still struggling to get it going. The entire rushing game is. He had fewer than double-digit fantasy points last week. He's failed to hit double-digit fantasy points 3 of 5 games. He has more than 70 rushing yards just once all year. Saints, they allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs, so I think Pierce could have more struggles in this one, unfortunately, which I don't like to say. All right, another question on here, Logan. We're getting some good ones this week. Really like it. Flex advice: Cortland Sutton, Jeff Wilson, or Amari DeMarcado. So, who do you like there? I think that's a close call. 3 similar
Yeah, all
options.
three are very close with that. I think I might go DeMarcado. I think they just have a really good matchup this week against the Rams. I think that's going to be a very high-scoring game. Again, Miami's always in the high-scoring game. I think I would go between those two, but I need to see Jeff Wilson in action first to kind of before I'm going to be starting him. But I'll be
I
going with DeMarcado.
I totally agree with you. I want to see Jeff Wilson first. So I think I would probably lean him if I'd seen him playing and they're splitting carries. But since I don't quite know how they're going to use him just yet, I know DeMarcado is not even listed as a starter on the depth chart they
Yeah.
released. They had Keontae Ingram first. So it's a little bit of a concern as well. But I'll go DeMarcado. I think he's the best option there, in my opinion. I think he can get some volume, get some work in the passing game as well. But it's a close call. I think Jeff Wilson may be a good factor going forward, though. It's good to have him on your roster for sure. All right, next game, Logan. Colts 3-2 at the Jags 3-2. Coming off a big win, Jags last week beating Buffalo, kind of an upset there. This should be a good one as well. Anybody you don't like in this matchup, though?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be fading Michael Pittman. With that, he's had back-to-back bad fantasy weeks, and then also that injury to Anthony Richardson, who's going to be out 4 to 8 weeks. I think that's definitely going to take a toll with him. You got Gardner Minshew now at quarterback, but I think the Colts are just going to turn to the run game. You got Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, who Moss has just been putting up monster numbers, and they're going to slowly be working Taylor back in, as we saw the last week with that. But I think they're going to control their offense through their run game, and I think they've been successful with it so far.
So you just mentioned him, and he's actually a fade for me this week is Jonathan Taylor. So although I
Yeah,
think they may run the ball, it
yeah,
still worries me
absolutely.
is his usage. He played just 15% of the snaps last week compared to 80 for Moss. So while I think it might be closer to a 50-50 split this week, I just don't think they're going to be sitting Moss a ton just yet with him playing so well. So until he
Yeah,
starts to stumble, they're going to ease Taylor into action. Jags also have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points for running backs. So I'm still scared to use Taylor at this point. I want to see him get more volume before I'm throwing him in my fantasy lineups. All right, next game on the slate, Panthers 0-5 at the Dolphins 4-1. I mean, Dolphins, I think they're just going to stomp them in this one. So,
yeah. I
who are
think
you
this
fading?
game could get ugly very quickly.
Yeah, who are you fading in this one?
So I'm going to be fading Miles Sanders. So he has not rushed over 44 yards since week one. Um, so he has not been very productive. I think this is going to be a blowout game. Last week we saw Chuba Hubbard even had more carries than Sanders. Sanders was a little bit banged up going into that game. He still had 7 carries. But again, as you mentioned, I think this is going to be a blowout game. I think Carolina is going to turn the passing game very quickly, playing from behind.
So you took my guy Miles Sanders, so I'm just going to move on. We're coming up against the
Perfect.
clock a little bit, and we got
Perfect.
more games to get to. So I agree with you. Miles Sanders is my
Yeah.
pick too. Next game, Patriots 1-4 at the Raiders, who are 1-3. Are they 2-3? They
Who,
won last week.
Patriots?
No, the Raiders. Are they?
They've got 2 wins.
Yeah, 2 wins. Okay, I apologize. I didn't put that in there right because they won
Yeah,
that game
2 and
Monday
3.
night. Yeah, 2-3. So Patriots 1-4, Raiders 2-3. Who you fading here?
Yeah, I think everyone's gonna be fading him and won't have him in any of your lineups. I'm gonna go with Mac Jones for that. I highly doubt even in a super flex league, you might not be starting him, but he's got 6 turnovers in the last 2 games. He has a combined 7 fantasy points in the last 2 games, which is pretty unheard of from a quarterback. So pretty self-explanatory, but I think a lot of people are going to be fading that Patriots offense as a whole.
So that's what I said. I said all Patriots. I really don't want any of
Yeah.
them. I'm serious. Even Ramondre Stevenson. I never thought I would say that because he usually gets so much work in the passing game. He didn't even catch a pass last week, and he pretty much split the work with Ezekiel Elliott. So I'm even fading him. I don't think he's going to have another great showing, especially with the way he's being used at this point. So I don't want any Patriots. I'm just avoiding them all. That's my call on this one. I know it's broad statement, but I'm serious when I say that.
Yeah.
I don't trust any of them. I thought Hunter Henry might be a guy that would be consistent, but he's done nothing in recent weeks as well. So I'm out. All right, next game, Lions 4-1 at the Bucs 3-1. This should be a good game in my opinion. Lions going on the road, they're hot. Bucs have played better. They're at home coming out of a bye week. Are you fading anyone in this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna be fading Jamison Williams. I think this is gonna be another one that most people will have on your bench. But he hasn't done anything in the past 2 years, even when he's been active. Amon, St. Brown, and Gibbs were both out last week, so you would think he would go ahead and step up and have a decent game. I get it was his first game back, but only 2 yards. That was very surprising, especially with those playmakers out. So before I can start Williams, I think I'll need to see at least a 50-plus yard performance from him.
I agree with you there. I'm not starting him until he starts producing, playing more in the field. My fade's Rashad White, so he's getting the volume. He has at least 17 touches every game. It hasn't led to huge fantasy numbers. He has fewer than double-digit fantasy points 2 of 4 games, despite getting all that work. He has more than 60 rushing yards just one game all year as well. So he plays the Lions this week. They actually allow the second fewest fantasy points to running backs, third overall against the run. So I think White could struggle in this one. This is looking like the Bucs defense of the past when they've been really good against the run and not the pass. All right, we got another question on here. I think it's a good one. Would you trade Zach Moss for Jerry Jeudy in a PPR league?
Yeah, as we kind of mentioned before, it kind of depends on your team needs if you need a running back or a wide receiver with that. Um, it's hard for me to let go of Moss with just how successful he's been in the last couple of weeks, and Judy hasn't been great. But you would assume that he's finally fully healthy again from that injury to start the year. But it's a close one, so I'm coming down to team needs. If you need a wide receiver, I would go with Judy. But if you need a running back, then
I mean, if you're not playing Moss and he's on your bench at this point, if you have 2 better running backs and
yeah.
Moss is just a bench guy because you have 2 better running backs ahead of him, I would make the trade. I'm not a huge Judy fan, but he still has 50-plus yards 3 straight games. He could get traded to a better situation as well. So I'm fine with making the trade if you need a receiver and you're not really using Moss. I'd say go for it because I think Moss's production is just going to go down. So we got another question on here. Should I trade Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins for Chris Godwin or Chris Godwin? Should I trade Amari Cooper plus? I'm kind of confused by the question. Can you figure it out?
Yeah, so it's gonna be
Should,
Amari Cooper plus either Hopkins or Godwin for
oh,
me.
I gotcha. I gotcha. What do you think?
I'm just not a huge fan of Metcalf, as I kind of mentioned before. I think that Seahawks wide receiver room is just too crowded, so I would personally hold on to them. I think it's just going to be too much to give up value-wise for Metcalf. But
Yeah, he's pretty deep at receiver though. So I mean, I'm okay with I think Metcalf's an upgrade over both Cooper and Hopkins, so I'm okay with doing that, just because he's deep at receiver. So I'm okay with that trade. I don't think it's gonna really shape his team and make him a Super Bowl contender, but I think I might make it actually personally. All right. So those are some good questions. We only have a minute left. Let's try to get to another game here. Let's see what's a good one left. I guess the Monday night game, Cowboys at Chargers, although the Cowboys were terrible last week. 3-2 Cowboys at the Chargers, 2-2. Anybody fading in what could be a high scoring game here?
yeah, he was a popular waiver ad, but I'm still not starting him, and that's going to be Quentin Johnson. It's his second game with Mike Williams out, but he has not topped over 20 yards on the season. He's probably been looking like one of the biggest busts for wide receivers so far for rookies. You got Flowers, Nakua, Addison, Dell, Downs, JSN, all who have had better seasons so far than Johnson, but there's a huge hole there, so we'll see if he steps up or if it's going to be Palmer.
Yeah, I don't like Dak Prescott in this game, even though it's a good matchup. The Chargers have been bad against the pass, but Prescott looks terrible right now. He's just 23rd overall in fantasy quarterback scoring. He has less than double-digit fantasy points 2 games. That's just crazy to me. I mean, that's terrible. He has fewer than 18 fantasy points all but a game as well. So I'm fading him despite the good matchup. I'm going with other options. And the guy who posted the question said Hopkins or Goodwin in the trade. I actually would trade Hopkins. I would keep Godwin personally. I think
Yeah.
Godwin has more value going forward. All right, we didn't get to every game, but it was always a lot of fun talking with you, Logan, about our fades for this week. Good luck to everybody out there. Really enjoyed interacting with you, getting a lot of questions this week. It's been a lot of fun. Logan, thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Good luck in all your week 6 games, everybody, and thanks for watching another edition of the Real Time Fantasy Sports Show.